Number 42 may be the first question for this passage, but it is the last question that we should do, because remember, our strategy is to save whole passage questions for last. And the reason we do that is that we're going to have a much better sense of what the whole passage is about after we have read and answered all of the other questions. So I use the no reading strategy, which means that I don't even read the passage. I just dive right into the question. So I have no choice. I have to save this for last, because how could I answer a question about the whole passage if I haven't even read a single line of it? But even if you do read, you got to save this, because all the other questions are going to tell you what the passage is about. They're going to ask about the main ideas, so that when we get to this question at the end, we know even more about what is important, at least in the SAT's eyes. So that's the key, is they're always going with what they think is important, right? So let's look at this. I think this is great. I'm not even going to look at the passage. I know I included it above here. I'm not even going to look at it because I have a good memory. I know what I read. So what's the primary purpose? To discuss the findings that offer a scientific explanation for the Venus flytrap's closing action. Do they talk about the closing? Yeah, constantly. The whole thing was about that. Do they talk about different explanations for it? Yeah, they talk about the calcium and electricity and all that stuff. Yeah, that seems right. Now, I'm going to obviously look at B, C, and D to be sure, but I'd be pretty confident in that right away. B, present research that suggests that the Venus flytrap's predatory behavior is both complex and unique among plants. Well, maybe it's complex. I don't know. Who's to say? That seems like an opinion kind of question. But unique among plants, well, if that were the main point, then we would have heard a lot more in these lines about other plants. We didn't. This was about the Venus flytrap and only the Venus flytrap. I don't even know if they mentioned another plant ever. So that's a good example of, like, if it was a main idea, we would have had a memory of that idea. And we don't. They're not talking about other plants in here. C, identify the process by which the Venus flytrap's closing action has evolved. Well, again, they're talking about the closing action, but they never talked about how it evolved. I don't know what came before the closing action. I only know how the closing action right now is supposed to work. So, again, I don't need to reread the passage. If it was about evolution, I would have remembered that. It's not mentioned. D, provide a brief overview of the Venus flytrap and its predatory behavior. That one's a little more tempting. But now, if you were between A and D, just compare them. Is it about the Venus flytrap, or is it about the closing of the Venus flytrap? Well, it's much more about the closing, right? The closing is again and again and again. There are other things about Venus flytraps that I never really heard about, right? I don't know how its roots work. I don't know how its leaves work. I don't know how it grows. I don't know how big it gets. I don't know what colors it even is. So it's not a brief overview of the Venus flytrap. It is a brief overview of the closing action of the Venus flytrap, right? I don't know anything else. So if you're between A and D, and that happens sometimes, we have two choices that seem like they both could be right, that's okay. That's a good job so far, and then we just look at those choices and we may think that they're similar, but obviously there's a difference. Boil it down. Try to narrow your focus. Is it about the closing action, or is it about the Venus flytrap in general? Closing action, 100%, no doubt, that's going to be the answer. And yeah, look, we didn't have to reread anything. We didn't need to go back, and that's because all the other questions prepared me for this one. I know what they care about because all the other questions asked about it, and they were all about that stupid closing thing. So I'm very confident that that's what the passage was about, and there you go. These hard ones aren't so hard.